as I said, we're taking a look at the future now. Let me introduce my futurists. So we have Sara Johnson from Carat. We have Joe Marchese he's on the client side now, so he's head of Casa Komos brands, and also Human Ventures, which, by the way, if we get into it, I think is the best branded venture capital firm because of all this AI stuff. But he used to be on the other side at Fox years ago selling to you guys. So he has an interesting perspective. Then we have Allie, who's with MAGNA, Interpublic Media Brands Negotiating and Intelligence Unit. And then we have Samantha Rose, who's head of investments for Horizon Media. So thank you all for being here. I want to frame the discussion so we're really in the mindset. So this is 2029 up front. It's April. Donald Trump's been inaugurated for his third elected presidency. This is the 21st MediaPost Upfront, my, 50th Upfront. I'm actually not here. I'm a virtual editor that's AI informed, and I will tell you, I hallucinate. Can you all hear me okay? With the mics? Good. All right, so I'm going to open with this. If I told you in this conversation in 2029 that you guys were still registering budgets with the networks on the supply side, that you were still negotiating off of gross, that you had probably like 18 currencies in the marketplace. I could go on and on and on, but what would you say? How would you explain this to an arrogant trade reporter who's asking you questions from the audience? Yeah? This is open for all of you guys to frame 2029, looking back on.
Hi everyone, how are you? I think we will definitely still be registering upfront budgets. I think you heard a lot on the panel before. Things are changing, things are evolving, so there will be an evolution for sure, and what that looks like, it will look different from today as it looked different 10 years ago. But I do think there's still value there for all sides to take advantage of, but it will look different. We're going to get smarter. We're going to continue to really value out the different currencies out there, see what makes the most sense. Hopefully there's not 18. I don't want that, but I think we need to make sure the fidelity is there for that right partner, for sure.
I actually think things will be very different. I think that everything that we do will be programmatic. I think deal structures will be similar from a digital perspective. Everything will run through, whether it's an SSP or a DSP, and if we have to do linear as a programmatic guarantee just to ensure the supply is there, that is what I believe, and I think it will be done at a higher level as opposed to by client.
I think there will be absolutely a huge amount done programmatically. I think it will be some fixed programmatic. So in my mind, PG is still upfront. We're still committing a fixed amount of spend. But I think it will be a combination of kind of fixed and PMP, which honestly is sort of upfront and scatter, right? It's just different names for it, but I think there absolutely will still be a need to have a certain amount of fixed with certain partners and across the board, and then some more PMP and flexible to capture a lot more of broad reach across the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I missed most of the panel before. Did we talk about video and just all video everywhere and single currencies? Because it sounds like we've been talking about that for a while. I guess I would go a different way. I would say that I think it's likely that we will have longer upfronts rather than registering 1 year at a time. I think it's going to actually go to 2, 3, 5-year deals where you think there's going to be attention. And I looked at this world as everything that's scarce or going to become more scarce goes up in value over time. People used to keep saying, why am I paying more for smaller audiences? Well, because there's smaller audiences and it's harder to get to them. I think brands should take positions in places they think are going to have attention many years out, not just in television, but just across media, because they're getting rarer.
I'd like to follow up on Joe's point, but I also want to come back to your other points. But that's a really interesting observation. Back in the distant age of the 90s, Enron was trying to become a player in media futures trading, and they actually did have a prototypical deal with NBC to do a 5-year forward market.
And that worked out great.
I'm sorry?
Nothing.
Anyway, we know what happened to Enron, but bringing it to 2029, given the scarcity of these valuable intellectual properties, this is how the Upfront started. It started with the development deals out in Hollywood, where you and your clients would secure these assets as a hedge. Why wouldn't you be thinking 3, 4, 5 years out?
I mean, you just need. We've talked about this a little bit before. It's kind of interesting. If you want the barbell, like you need the Bernard Arnault, and Jeff Bezos, the 2 richest people on planet Earth at any given time recently. Jeff Bezos, your margin is my opportunity. Bernard Arnault, highest margin products in the world. But for our conversation on Upfront, it's like culture is on sale. Things that are hard to measure, you can buy as long as you can have a 5 and 10 year view. So I think the hard part about what the Upfronts will look like in 2029 is who has permission to buy like that. I mean, it's harder and harder even today to do it. Clients are looking for ROI on daily cycles, weekly, at least quarterly.
And we need flexibility. At the end of the day, we need to be able to buy how we need it, when we need it, and what we're trying to sell at that moment. And it asks and demands inherent flexibility across the board. And the Upfront, I truly believe it's relatively antiquated and it needs to move forward, and we need to be those people to drive that.
So we have this tension of flexibility and long-term asset commitment. You've always been dealing with this in every marketplace, every year, of that balance, and a lot of it has to do with the strength of the supply versus the demand side. Feels like we're in a very strong buy-side position going in, although if you talk to some of the people in this audience, they would counter that. Do you have any interest in building longer-term upfront commitments, or are you happy with this?
I think the idea of a longer upfront commitment can be there, but what the terms and conditions that go into that are really important. What does that mean? We have a hard time kind of predicting what the next year looks like, so it's really hard to kind of predict the next 2, 3, 5 years. So when we're talking about kind of upfront commitments and longer term deals, is what goes into it, and then also what am I getting out of it for my clients? Like, it has to be something like real, actual, tangible examples of what we can get for it, and greater flexibility and things like that. I don't think it's just commit to what an upfront long-term deal used to be, which is just commit more volume and we'll dive on price. That can be part of it, but it also has to be a lot more of these other things.
And John said before that he does not like the word endeavor. I don't like the word commitment. There's a reason why I'm still single. Yeah, I think commitment's too committed.
Well, let me give you a real-world example where you do make commitments forward like that, because your clients have to. It's called the Olympics. So if they're going to get an endorsement from a athletic spokesperson, those budgets and those plans are set years in advance of the summer games or the winter games or whatever. And I think you do some forward buying to secure up inventory for that. That's a good example of a cultural asset that's a scarcity.
Well, let's go with the most treasured cultural asset, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. The National Football League. But joking aside, there are very few things that have that much, so it's bought very much in upfronts. Most of the media buys are actually, I'm sure it's still this way, but when I was selling the Fox ad sales, it's like, hey, forward months, the halftime show, or we've got these opportunities, and Terry and Howie can drive the truck out, and then we're going to do this and do that. Okay, great, you spent this last year. You have to spend this plus this year. And if we fix the volume and we fix audience, then the price of the media effective or not becomes the problem. But what's happening now is there was no way to price that culture part. Being adjacent to football is highly valuable. We've just been paying for it in commercials. Now, if I'm picturing 2029, I'm saying what a longer term lock-in is, I'm going to be next to these cultural assets that you have over long term, and we'll work together to figure out how big that reach is going to be. But you have to start to value that, and that's very hard to do because it's negotiated. There is no currency for that.
Well, and you also want to make sure you've got the dollars and the flexibility to attach yourselves to that in real time. So we can't make who the next Travis and Taylor will be in 5 years. I mean, I love Taylor Swift, so I hope they're, still going strong. But you need that flexibility in that with your clients to be able to attach yourselves and find those cultural moments. So having that within the upfront deals, evolving that is still critically important.
Okay. I want to go back to your point about it being totally programmatic, which is a very aggressive position to take. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but might it evolve into something else? So we named your sister unit, Kinesso, as one of our media agencies of the year this year, partly because of their move to algorithmic trading. And now that we're moving much more into an AI kind of big data identity spine framework, do you think machines will be doing this, or will they still be humans driving it 5 years from now?
I think there will always be humans. You need a subjective eye against a lot of what you are looking at. Programmatic is an amazing way to utilize audiences and ensure you're delivering your media to the person that you are looking for. And AI can help that. But at the end of the day, let's use the internet as the specific example here, as opposed to linear. It's big. There's a lot of challenges out there. There's a lot of crap. There's a lot of bad sites, and you need a human to be able to say, here is what I am looking for, here is what I want to be, here are the brand safe places that I want to go.
Yeah, I think the trouble, I feel like it's wildly, the whole industry has overswung to data and audience versus context and attention. And the reason why is because I could have all the data about everyone in this room, but if I can't get your attention, I can't change your mind about anything. I could have no data about anybody in this room, but if I can have your attention, I could potentially change your mind about something. And the other part is the myth of targeted ROI. Like, you don't sell a car just to the person who buys the car. You sell a car to someone, and the person's friend knows what the car is. Their mother knows what the car is. Their girlfriend or boyfriend knows what the car is. And so brands are built at a much wider level than the internet has kind of convinced the world if you can't measure it, don't buy it, which means everything that's hard to measure or is measured in years is probably undervalued. We just don't know how to price it right now.
So are we going to move back to a more intuitive, gut, big idea, creative, less data, big data, precision targeting world? And do you guys agree with that? I mean, you already said we're moving to programmatic.
Well, I think there's a place for both. I think it's going to be audiences and content. And I think that's how we're going to be looking at everything moving forward.
Yeah, I agree for sure. I think that is what has been the strength of linear for so long, right? It is about broad reach, immediate, big scale. Obviously, there's fewer and fewer places in linear to do that now. It's primarily sports. But I think there's definitely a place on everyone's media plan for kind of, like upper funnel, like very big, like looking for GRPs, just looking for eyeballs, and then a combination of that with targeting. And it's not one. And if we really want to drive towards business outcomes and do business outcomes guarantees, that makes sense for a part of our plan for established brands, not all brands, but for established brands. That's not everything. I think if we're talking about alternative currency, we've been primarily talking about alternative currency about who we're going to use to measure eyeballs. It's a handful of partners at the moment, but we also in the future will be talking about whether we're guaranteeing on attention and other, and business outcomes and things like that. But I don't think, especially in 5 years, it will be 100% business outcome based. I think it will be a part of what we're doing.
I'm I'm kind of against business outcomes as a measure for a couple of reasons. One is most media providers sell to 2 people or 3 people or 4 people in a category. How can I be like, okay, Toyota, you and me, we're going to help you get to business outcomes as the media owner, and then leave the room and then go into Ford and be like, okay, Ford, we're going to get to outcomes, right? And so like that's hard for media owners to get to. I think it has to. I mean, I don't understand how it's not on the attention side of things, and the currency doesn't go there, because without that, we're not going to change the format. And that means that we're betting that the 30-second spot and the 15-second spot are still the 30 and the 15 in 2029. And I think that the idea of ownership and streams, and there's innovation in format, but with innovation in format, your currency breaks down unless you have something that doesn't make it binary. It isn't either on or off. It has to be a level of quality.
Yeah, so you've always guaranteed on business outcomes. It's just what the outcome was defined as. And a GRP was an outcome, and that's what you were delivering. Is that changing to a different outcome? So when we wrote the profiles on our agency of the years, we sourced the ANA's report during the year on transparency. The 2 biggest issues they said were facing the industry are information asymmetry, which I'll come to later, but the other is misaligned incentives. And the problem, it's not just the agency's fault, it's the client's fault too. You're a client now, Joe, it's your problem. Which is that if you ask your agencies to buy GRPs or CPMs or attention or whatever it is, that's what they're going to deliver on, and they're going to try and optimize that outcome. Do we have a disconnect between clients and agencies right now about what those outcomes should be?
It's a big question.
Yeah, from the client, like as someone who's now buying media and like used to be selling it, so I got to skip from other sides. Yes, but it's like it's the system. Like we conflate measurement with currencies. We did that on purpose. It's not a bug. It's a feature of the system because that's where margin is now made. And clients do push agencies like with a procurement mindset towards media, with not a marketer mindset towards media. And so that has put us in this place. I will say, someone comes from digital, then sold television. I love billboards at this point. Like I like trucks that roll around the streets. Like, I mean, if smoke signals come back into fashion, I'm buying those. But I don't know how to value these things. And I'm lucky because I control some of these brands, so I can just say, great, I think this is going to work. We'll know in a couple of years if I've built a brand or not. That's hard to do at the massive scales.
So in the last panel, there was a discussion a little bit about this, which is that we're still using old tools like marketing mix models, which were TV-centric design, to measure outcomes. And what I was trying to get at with that other question about moving from a TV universe estimate to an actual universe estimate is, do we have an opportunity now to rethink the whole mix? And look, we're at a time now where we struggle even to use the word television, or what is a network, or what is streaming, what is OTT or CTV. It is attention, it is media, it could be outdoor. Are we gonna, in 2029, be talking about what I always thought we should do, a full media marketplace, where you're programmatically or algorithmically buying and selling attention of people based on those business outcomes?
I mean, TV specifically is a screen. It starts with the screen, and then it's built by how you get your content, and then within that content, it's how you get it, whether it's a fast channel, linear TV, app, premium AVOD, all of those things. The holy grail is to be able to buy all of it against the same currency, and you can measure it however you want using whatever measurement that works for your brand. And I'm including social video in that as well. It's all video. And we need to be able to move to a place where we can measure it holistically. We can have frequency management, so where we're not, as Maureen was saying earlier, seeing the same ad over and over again, and we can look at it in totality, and it will be impressions. It will not necessarily be, GRPs are just a %.
I think Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
No, I think it goes back to the universe question too. It's coming a lot up more and more with clients. Is the GRP relevant on a flow? And I think yes, there's still value of it. It's still a percentage, still a metric that you can view and utilize to quantify a plan. But when your audiences are so varied across, or you're trying to reach the same audience across channel, but that universe size varies drastically, the impression view is really important. So I think that's definitely something that we'll see that shift towards.
I mean, is this a good thing? I mean, I'm surprised we didn't talk about coverage area ratings in the previous panel when they were talking about cable. We've always looked at different numerators and denominators for media reach and frequency. Is the idea of resetting it to the actual population, this is a good thing, right? I mean, for TV and everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is you talked about it a little bit, but the video landscape is really much more fragmented, right? And we've spent a lot of time talking about the difference between linear and streaming and social video and what is video. But also the reality is our media plans are more fragmented across the other channels as well. There's audio is a much bigger place, out of home. Whenever smoke signals get involved, we can throw that in there too. But our media plans are much more fragmented. So the upfront is a smaller part of that, still integral part of it, but it's smaller because our video mix is even maybe smaller than it was a few years ago, and probably will look different in 5 years as well. But I think the reality is, like, although the channel might be similar, video is still video, audio is still audio, so much more of each of those channels is actually digitally delivered, right? That's the where things are going, that's how consumers are consuming, which makes it more addressably enabled and things that we can then access programmatically. So if we are doing so much more in a programmatic environment and more within kind of these areas where we're going to have more frequency capabilities and we're going to just have more tools, using a TV universe is silly. And until you brought it up before, I was like, that's a big deal, and we haven't been talking about it.
Yeah, I'm curious for everyone on the panels if you think you'll be buying, because I would say the one difference with video or video everywhere or saying it's a screen is that I think CTV is different than anything that we've had before, because it's the environment of viewing is different than mobile and social, and mobile's really soaking up most of the dollars on the performance side, whereas CTV really has a chance to be something different. Now, I think what CTV did is it took all the worst parts of television, the 30-second spots, and then all the worst parts of the internet, rampant fraud and mismeasurement, and then it mashed them up together and said, here you go, world. And now the consumer, it's just a terrible consumer experience. So I don't know how we fix that on the buy side, but I'm interested if you'd say, I think YouTube on phone is more different than YouTube on CTV than CTV streaming and YouTube on CTV is, right? So those are both YouTube, and they probably get bought YouTube, but I would make the argument that CTV could be bought across much more similarly.
Put a pin on that one. To go back to your other question about population, I think to everybody's point, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, I didn't think about TV homes. I don't care. I care about the person I'm trying to reach and to sell a product to. So population is important, but that being able to target that human is really what we're going after. And then to your point, I agree. But I also think, depending on, I go back to the individual who is consuming the content. They could be very engaged with watching YouTube on their phone, just as engaged as they are when they're watching it on their screen. Or they can be disengaged. They could, kids running around and they have it on the screen and they're doing a million things and go to the bathroom, TV's still on. So I think there are arguments to be made in both ways.
Yeah, I'm not actually arguing whether one is better than the other, actually. It's not relativism. It's actually more that CTV is more similar to each other across the way, right, than YouTube is on phone and on CTV. The capabilities, the way you can interact with it, the ad formats, so I see CTV as a block as very interesting, and I'm curious if you see, just think about buying YouTube CTV with TV-like budgets. And have you seen anything like it, or do you think we're there in 2029? Sorry, I'm stealing. We have a very similar name, so I'm just jumping in.
Well, that's true. He's my typologosemic brother from another mother, but that's an inside joke.
I think if the content is there and that's what our viewer is watching, that, again, to Allie's point, is the most important thing to us. So they're there and they're watching it, we'll buy it.
To your point, Allie, do you think we need to be doing some fundamental rethinking of communications planning research? Because all those points that Joe cited about CTV, let me ask you all a question. Do you know what the largest audio platform in the world is right now? Anybody know?
Terrestrial radio?
It's called YouTube. They're the biggest licensor of music to ASCAP in the music industry. But we don't think of it that way, right? But to the user, you know, if they're plugged in on their device and walking around listening to tunes on YouTube for free, you know, that's an audio medium for them. So when we talk about screens, yeah, it's important to know when someone's visually in front of a screen, but do we need to rethink like how we used to do all these personal day in the life things of consumer experience with media? Do we need some kind of thing like that to understand that it's not just CTV or YouTube, it's these different consumer experiences that you're engaging with? Sorry, I'm asking hard questions, but I want to know how the thing is.
No, I mean, yes. But I think to take it a step, I'd think through, because this is how the internet broke, right? Which was, and why we're ending with the walled gardens, and why there's not a lot of great quality outside. It's that the numbers and the data would show you something, but there's no first-person narrative as to like think through your day, like how many, you know, geotargeting ads for Starbucks, and the story was always, oh yeah, well when you walk by the Starbucks, we can geotarget. I'm like, where does the ad? Do you guys get pop-ups on your phone? Like, or do you have to be reading a website when you go by the Starbucks? Like the narrative, but yet there's inventory out there. You can find it. So the narrative never matched up with what was there, and that's where we're getting to with CTV. So, you know, as on a brand owner side, I basically challenged my marketing teams on different brands that, like, take me through an experience where someone's gonna, like, from the other side, from a consumer side, and then I'll understand buying that at scale. Like, you just can't buy off the plan alone, which is hence why I still think you're gonna see not just longer upfronts, but category exclusivity for things that really work well to build brands.
If there are any questions from the audience, I don't want to be the only one asking hard questions here. Just raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you.
Or ask easy ones.
Well, let me ask you all an easy one. So what is the one thing you'd like to change 5 years from now that we do stupid today?
Gross dollars. There is no reason why linear should be sold in gross dollars. It doesn't mean anything anymore. 15% is not a thing. And it is the amount of mistakes that happen on the buying side and the seller side on grossing things up and netting things down is out of control.
Talk about transactional readiness.
It's insane. Don Draper, great, you can have your 15%.
So why are we still doing that?
Ask the sales. I think on the buying side, we would rather do it in net. And so I was talking to someone last week, and he's like, if we can do multiple currencies, why can't we flip a switch to net? It makes no sense. So I never want to hear a seller saying, well, our systems can't do it. Bullshit.
I would say I'm in Allie's camp with kind of the shift towards programmatic. I think programmatic is going to be beneficial, but we all know there's still a lot of pain points with programmatic and a lot of people taking cuts out, and we have to, you know, supply path optimization and all of the things that have come up within the past few years, particularly as CTV budgets get into programmatic, the dollars are shifting there. So I would like to see a lot more efficiency and transparency. Like, we are not going to all win if we want to shift to programmatic and it costs us that much more and we have to take cuts out for our clients. It's just not going to go that way. And I think it's the right way to go. So we need to figure it out. And that is it's the buy side, it's the sell side, it's the DSPs, it's the SSPs. It really needs to be everybody. But I certainly think on the sell side and the buy side need to be on this together, because we need to be pushing all those other third parties to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think that will just make the user experience all the more better. It will help with the frequency issues that we're seeing, and getting on the same page with everyone. Both sides is really important. But I think that move to programmatic, especially in CTV, we'll continue to see that. We need that holistic view so we can really pull the levers that we need to do as buyers to make sure we're reaching our specific audience, not over-frequencing them, and making the experience meaningful, ultimately.
I hope absolutely nothing changes. And it's because, no, I used to get up on the stage at the Beacon and have to tell people, like, oh, no, like, you know, an ad here is not the same thing as an ad there, and I want to convince you to do things differently. And, you know, tried to have shorter ads, and we tried to do a bunch of things, and then I realized when I was on the outside, I was like, screw it, we can just beat the market. Like, if the market stays dumb and buying things that don't work, I can buy little bits here and there and start building brands, and I'd love 5 more years. Like, I would love to have a chance to be buying and building brands for 5 more years where the market's this inefficient, so.
By the way, that's always been my theory about the upfront, why all these weird things still exist, is because each of you think you can hedge better than the other guy, because transparently, you're all doing something wrong, and that behind the scenes, you're all doing it right. It's my theory. But any questions from the audience? Oh, we have one right here.
Hi, I'm Lauren Zweifler. I have had the privilege of working with some of your colleagues. I'm on the data insights and measurement side of the business. So I find this conversation really great in the prior panel as well. A lot of art and science, right? You talked about creative, you talked about contextual, and obviously everybody wants like the best currency or alternative currencies, but I guess my question for you all is like, what's that next layer down? Like Dentsu's been known for the attention economy. I think Horizon's been known for working with engagement metrics with other companies. I've had the privilege of working with IPG MAGNA Media Trials on really trying to move the multicultural consumer. So I'm just curious, what's next after currency to really, and maybe it's engagement metrics that are the outcome, and I love that because I am about art and science. So I'm just curious what you've been thinking of that you could share with us so we could do better for you in the future.
I mean, I think, but again, this is hard to do without that first layer of a different currency is format, right? Like the sponsors, you know, sponsored streams and single advertiser, like everything that's old is new again, right? I think we talked about this years ago, and it's like, that is very valuable, but doesn't fit a media model that we price on right now. But if we can measure how it's effective, the problem is with effectiveness measurement, it's like, well, was it a good ad? Was the product good? Like, I mean, was there a recall? Like, is it raining on Tuesday? I mean, it gets really hard to go too far, but I think it's this mix of quality of attention and context that you're set in. Somehow those two things kind of mash up.
So I have a question for the audience. How many of you think Joe Marchese should start writing a column for MediaPost again? I do.
I'll feed my old ones into ChatGPT and see what it comes out with. I sent it to you. I wrote an article 10 years ago, to the day, 1 month ago. And that article 10 years ago was titled, Why You Should Shut Up and Love the Bundle. And then the answer in the article was, you're ruining it for everybody else. Everything's a bundle. You don't watch everything on Netflix, but you don't complain about the stuff you're not watching. The problem with cable was the advertising and the UI, UX, and now we've broke it all.
So I said I would talk about information asymmetry. I think it's a huge problem in all marketplaces, not just media and advertising. But you know, the ANA called it out. They were specifically talking about programmatic and transparency and things like that. But I do think it's at play in the television marketplace in other ways. So you start off by saying that you think we will be registering budgets 5 years from now. I've never really
It will look very different. I'm not
Okay.
saying it's going to look like it will today, but I do think, again, if the value is there, if we can continue to push and innovate, push the flexibility, innovate the performance outcomes eventually that hopefully we start to measure, it will still serve a function.
So this is my pet peeve about the business, which is when I started covering advertising and media, I thought it was a symmetrical marketplace where two sides haggled over supply and demand. But it's one where you actually have to give intelligence to your suppliers in order to allocate inventory to you. And that's a very lopsided market structure. So I don't understand how it's to your advantage. I know, like, you want to get the things you want, but shouldn't they be coming to you and asking you for information not you giving them information.
I think it's a balance. I think it has to go both ways. I think agencies are getting more and more advanced in how we're planning too, with the data and the audiences that we have at our fingertips, so we can determine where across the landscape and across the partners that we should be allocating. So we know that without having to give something to the network specifically. I really just think it's dependent on what a brand and client is trying to do, and what KPI they're trying to deliver against.
Okay. I'm going to make a prediction. I'm not going to be asking that question 5 years from now. So, any other questions from the attendees? Got a big brand guy here you can ask about.
No, one thing I'd challenge too is I think share of voice will matter more, because share of voice, total audience. That's one way to look at saying, okay, I want to buy this thing. I don't know how many. I don't need impressions. The goal was never really to buy impressions cheap. The goal was to build your brand with a particular group of people, right? That back to the NFL sponsorship. So I wonder if there'll be more share of voice discussions with media owners, and then share of voice, total audience, and then moving the needle. That's a more interesting way to buy.
I mean, I also think that in 5 years, there's the upfront with the registering of budgets is a very linear way to do business because there is a scarcity issue. That is becoming less and less important over time with the proliferation of digital video and the supply. The supply we have going into this market is incredible with the launch of Prime Video, 115 million monthlies. It all of a sudden dropped into the market. So it's about creating deal structures that allow you to have what you want without having to give client level budgets. It shouldn't be a thing anymore. It really shouldn't. It is too specific. Obviously, we have to protect client level pricing on the linear side, but linear is shifting away, and it is getting older, and the audiences that you are trying to reach, if you really are trying to reach an 18 to 49-year-old, which again, demos I also think are not really a thing anymore either. I don't really want to reach an 18 to 49-year-old. I want to reach somebody who's eating pizza on Tuesdays. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to go after.
But the thing that I've struggled with, and again, I still don't want anything to change, but is supply going up in total right now? Because I don't think from a consumer standpoint, I don't think people are watching more ads, right? There are some people who watch fashion, but you cannot throw into the mix Netflix, the people who still watch on the ad-free HBO. You can't throw in all the ad-free options, YouTube, and then say, and TV shrinking, and say that there's more total time. Like this, if we went back to the consumer and we just did that first party, if we could get, a nice sized panel. By the way, fun fact, I love panels. The reason I love not this kind of panel, although this is fun too, but it's panels could be wrong, but they're directionally wrong for everybody. We're all reading off the same wrong clock, whereas fraud is just rampant, and it's just, So I guess my question is, do we really think consumers are watching more ads today than they were? Or are we slicing it thinner? And if that's the case, how do you factor that in?
Well, I think it's, right, part of our problem is also it's harder to know what the true scale of everything is, right? We talk about we don't just talk about, measuring, we talk about subscription. Subscribers doesn't equal ad inventory, we all know that. Also, things might have, when you go from linear to streaming, there are less ad minutes per hour. I don't think we should just increase the number of ad minutes per hour, because then we all know that attention's going to go down, and that was the problem of where things went. But I think that is where attention comes into play, because yes, there are more ads. Part of display inventory is littered with ads, and then it's not a good user experience. So there might be more ad inventory, or maybe around the same in some, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing either, because people are paying less attention to them. And I think the share of voice point is a good one, which is I might be willing to pay a little bit more for something that's a little bit more customized and a little bit more a higher attention metric. And that, I think, is where also with we all know this is streaming is going to go there. It's not just about the 30 and the 15. It's all about these other unique executions that we can execute within CTV that actually makes it really interesting.
We're actually out of time, but I want to give a sum up, if you don't mind, based on Joe's question, which is, I think the answer is no. Because, and I'm not just talking about ad blockers and VPNs and every other gizmo technology that the consumer has now to avoid messages. When I started covering the business, I had J. Walter Thompson research that showed me that the average consumer is exposed to 500 ad impressions a day. 20 years ago, Nielsen ramped it up to like 12,000. So there's a lot of things being served. But I'm ending on an anecdote. When Brian Monahan, who was then at IPG Media Labs, was giving a keynote at a MediaPost event 20 years ago, and he had a screen up showing VCRs and zapping and commercial. And he turns to the audience and he says, the biggest threat to our commercials is not the VCR, it's people turning their heads. And that gets back to your engagement point. And I think 5 years from now, maybe we will be talking more about that. I'm sorry I have so many hard questions. You did a great job of countering them, but we're trying to figure out what's going to happen 5 years from now, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.